Hi everyone, welcome back to my next video. If you enjoy this video, please remember to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Today is going to be the second half of the footage of me painting this greyhound with sunflowers in the background. This piece was done for a charity auction for the Always Greyhounds fundraising group. I've now handed the original off, as well as 10 cards that I had printed. I think some of the cards are going to be auctioned in the first auction that takes place soon, and the original piece is going to be auctioned later in the year. Seeing the finished piece, I was really inspired by how well it turned out, and it was really thrilling to receive the cards with the design on. The quality of the card that I ordered was really lovely, and the design looked really beautiful on it. There's a little clip towards the end of this video where I'm just taking the cards that had arrived and folding them up and putting them into cellophane. I decided to take that footage to be able to look back on in the future and remember a moment where I again had one of life's firsts with printing my work onto greeting cards. Going through that process with a separate printing company has made me realise how expensive it is to have them printed this way. But it's also inspired me to get set up for home printing. So even if I can't achieve quite the same level of quality as a professional print shop at home, I've decided to get set up with an entry-level printer so that I can do some photo prints and some greeting cards from home and hopefully sell them on my Etsy shop. So right now I'm actually starting to work on designs that I can hopefully print out on greeting cards, and I'll probably be focusing on that for the next little while. By the way, if you notice that I'm sounding a lot better in this video, it's because I decided to just take the plunge and get an entry-level microphone so that I'm not recording off the Windows built-in microphone or the webcam's built-in microphone. I was planning to do the videos with a blue snowball that my husband has, but unfortunately my Windows laptop wasn't picking it up at all, and after troubleshooting it a lot I decided it was just far easier just to buy a £40 microphone that was reviewing well. So hopefully the audio quality will be a lot better from here on out. So back to the piece that I'm doing in the video today. I had a nice sort of clear view of it right at the start of the video so you can see where it was left off the last time that I finished working on it. The footage in this video was taken over quite a lot of sessions from probably around about sort of like probably beyond the midpoint of everything being finished, but even though it felt like the midpoint had been reached, there was still a heck of a lot of problems to solve with it. So one of the main things that I did in this video, which will be coming up at some point, is that I obviously added in the background, which I had already decided would be at the top very, very sort of saturated blue sky, because I knew that would contrast very nicely with the sunflowers and set everything off. But obviously this has been handled quite a bit differently than how it would be most of the time if you're working with watercolours. With watercolours, most often if you're doing a large area where you want to have colour without any obvious hard edge, you'd achieve that using a wash by flooding the whole area with water, which is exactly what I do when I get around to that in the video. But usually you'd mask off the stuff that you don't want to absorb the water or the ink or paint that you're using, which, as you'll see, I didn't do. I just basically did it maverick and hoped for the best. Admittedly, I was still very, very careful while doing this, and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't trust my own water control. You can actually see me on screen doing a test first to make sure that I understand how fast and how far the ink is going to spread, and to make sure that I'm happy with the effect that I'm getting from the two colours of blue that I'm using. I used a really deep ultramarine kind of blue for the upper left corner, and then I added in some aqua to sort of give it a multi-tonal feel. So here you can see I'm wetting all the areas that I want the ink to flood into, and I'm doing this by carefully outlining each of these petals, but as you'll see when the flood starts, there are places where it goes over the edges slightly. This could have of course been avoided if I'd masked the whole lot, but I'll be completely honest that it's just down to personal preference that I don't do it that way, because I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to like intricately cutting out masking tape for every single shape in a picture like this. You can of course do it the opposite way round, where you wouldn't be painting any of the foreground elements first and you'd actually be painting in the sky at the point where none of the rest of the picture is done. So you'd probably be, masking off all of the things that were going to be painted later at the start. But again, it just didn't suit my process because I feel like I wasn't certain that any part of this was going to go exactly right from the start. I didn't have a finished piece even in my head when I started putting the pencil onto the page to do the dog. So doing everything in the order that I did it just happened to be the way around I needed to do it, and so there are some problems that I had to solve that wouldn't have otherwise occurred had I been masking everything. So the main thing that I had to touch up after I did the flood here was that some of the petals had a bit of overlapping blue over them, or just didn't quite look as, properly finished off anymore. So what I ended up doing was getting the sky to a point where I was happy with it, which needed to be achieved fairly fast, because the problem with doing a flood like this is that, like I say, you're trying to avoid hard edges because you want the sky to look smooth and, continuous. So you need to work very fast before things start to dry out. So you'll see me focus on getting the sky right, and then I'll probably move on to actually touching up the petals of the sunflowers afterwards. And mostly I did this by looking for the areas that appeared like they had a little bit of blue overlapping, and I usually went around and highlighted the edge of the petal more clearly with a darker colour, or in some cases where there was a little bit too much overlap and I couldn't see a way to getting it to look correct, I actually darkened the petal so that the blue overlapping wasn't as visible. In spite of the fact that this came about because I feel like I took a lazy option here, I'm actually very, very pleased with the way that the edges of the sunflowers turned out after going through this process. The other main thing that I had to solve as I came closer and closer to the end of this piece is the fact that the dog wasn't really showing up against the background as well once I'd finished everything. This was mainly because the sunflowers were so detailed and everything behind it was so vibrant that it wasn't really showing up as though it were the foreground central element anymore. So once I realised this, I went around the whole picture adding detail to the dog, mostly in the form of highlighting the outer edges of it to make sure that it was clearly defined against what was behind it, but this still wasn't quite getting it to where it felt like it was complete. In the end, the solution was that I actually needed to add a little bit more detail to various areas of fur on it. There were areas that I'd left fairly undetailed that seemed okay back when the dog was the main thing that was finished in the piece, but these areas weren't drawing the eye once all of the background was detailed. So towards the end of the video you'll see me go over for a final detail pass over the dog. And while it's not easy to see what effect this has in the video, if you check out the finalised piece that I'll link in the description, it becomes much more obvious how important this was to really get the eye to focus on the dog as the central element. Which of course made a lot of sense to me in retrospect, because objects that are closer to you will naturally have more detail when you're looking at them. Before I forget, I also want to just talk a little bit about the sort of mental challenges that this piece presented me with. I haven't worked at A3 size in quite some time, especially not painting something that fills the entire page like this. And so there were a really large amount of moments where I had that inner critic voice inside my head, expressing doubts about my ability to find solutions to things so that I could find the path to the final product. Thankfully, after working on my art for the last sort of 2 years or so, and really focusing on physical media rather than digital, I've reached a point where I trust myself a lot more to find those solutions. And I've also let go of quite a lot of the perfectionism that would have previously prevented me from enjoying the finished product. So while those internal voices still occurred, I knew how to step away from the piece when I needed to, and how to not get worked up when I wasn't completely certain how to proceed with things. I think there's actually a point that I may have left in this video where you might see me get to the point where the background looks just about complete, and I've done some things to the dog itself, but then I think that I just sort of sit there and don't do anything to it for quite a few minutes. And that's me pulling back to just kind of look at the whole thing and clear my mind and try to let the solutions flow in. There is a touch of logic to some of the process, but I find for most of the solutions what you actually need to do is sit there, clear things out of your head, and wait to feel that pull of where you should focus next and what you should be doing. So it's much more of an intuitive and going with your gut and heart kind of process. And I have to admit that I really like that part of it. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the video footage. I'm just going to mention here that I am open for commissions. So if you've seen anything in this video or any of my previous videos that you'd be interested in, do drop me a message over Facebook and we can discuss what it is that you want and whether I feel that I can supply it. I certainly feel keen to try this style of picture again in the future, with an animal front and centre and a floral background. So I feel this style would fit pet portraits very well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Please keep an eye out for greetings card announcements, because I'm hoping to get that set up pretty soon as well. Bye!
she's waiting for love to be realized. I'll send her the heart.